Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of Quizzing Cameron, where I take your management and leadership questions and do my best to answer them. So if you come across a question, if what you're listening to inspires a question from you, by all means go ahead and note it in the reply to this video, and we'll go ahead and get that on the list of things to answer. I will answer every single question that is asked through the course of these videos, so if you don't get it in the next episode, just keep tuning in and I promise I will get it to you in a timely fashion. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Our first question is from Jamie Lynn, and it is, how best to deal with ineffective owners in a small family-owned business? Is it best to speak up or best to find new employment elsewhere? Jamie Lynn, that's a great question, and for everybody who works in a small business, it's something that we would all deal with, and that is an owner that isn't necessarily the best leader, and we don't necessarily see eye to eye. And I fall back on something that Peter Drucker said, and it's never try to change business cultures, just try to work within the culture that currently exists. And that goes for big corporations, but I think it goes even more for small business, where an owner can really impart their leadership style, and they are absolutely justified in doing that since they own the business. And so my first bit of encouragement is to definitely be diplomatic before you speak up or do anything along those lines. Realize that you don't necessarily have the authority, and I almost guarantee you the business owner doesn't feel like you have the authority to tell them how to run their business. So if you're asking that question, I think you've got one of those owners. So the couple of things that I will have from a practical standpoint for you are that there are ways to try to lead the business owner or lead your boss in the right direction. You're trying to lead a horse to water, shall we say. And so you try to lead with, what are the goals for this particular thing? What is the outcome that you're looking for? Because oftentimes where the leader falls short is they don't set clear expectations, they don't set clear goals, and the reason they do that is so that they can fall short, and nobody's really the wiser that they fell short. So try to elicit what that directive is and what exactly they're looking for from themselves and what they're looking at for you, and then try to maneuver the conversation to hard numbers, something that can't be fuzzy. If you have sales to report, or if you have production numbers to report, focus on those, and that way they can see that what you're bringing to the business is having a contributing effect, and regardless of anything else that might be said, that's that they can't shy away from that. But it's a tough spot. You have to figure out whether your personal growth and professional growth is going to take place there, or if you need to look elsewhere. And that's what I really tell people when they say, they threaten to look for another job in these questions, is look at where you best are going to be best at is from a growth standpoint, because that's what you want. You want that experience, because that's what translates into better positions either in your current company or in another company. Thanks for the question, Jamie Lynn. Our next question comes from Luke. Luke is a store manager at Lowe's, and I really hope that the barbecue sales went really well over the Memorial Day weekend, and that everybody's gearing up for summer for you. He had actually two-part question, and it is, how do you approach department managers when they have a desire for promotion but not necessarily the leadership skills? And along with that, how do you draw out the potential in people that you see that you think can be leaders but don't necessarily see that in themselves? And those are both really fantastic questions. The first one in regards to your department managers who all feel like they want to be the assistant store manager or store manager one day and don't necessarily have the skills, is this becomes an exercise in leadership for you. You have to get very clear on where their shortcomings are, and you have to get clear with them. They won't necessarily see it, and so that's the real challenge from a leader's standpoint, is trying to get across and communicate what it is that they need to do to an individual that doesn't really want to hear it, for lack of a better phrase. So you need to get very clear on what they need, and then you need to help them get to where they want to be. So yes, they need to improve in their communication style. Well, how are you going to work with them so that they improve their communication style? Are you going to recommend that they have pre-shift and post-shift meetings? Are you going to recommend that they send out a weekly newsletter to their department? Are you going to recommend that they have one-on-ones? What are you going to do? So you have to get very clear, and that's tough because oftentimes as leaders we don't know. We know they're falling short. We know they're not doing displaying the leadership traits that we want, but we can't really put our finger on what exactly it is. And so the challenge is to put your finger on what exactly it is and help your department manager address that particular shortcoming so that they can be ready for the next role. And I really appreciate the way that you phrased that question, because I can see that you really want those people to move up in the organization. The second question you had was, how do you draw out the potential in people that don't necessarily think that they have it? And I think what we're getting at is people who don't necessarily have the confidence. And so what you want to do is you want to instill in them the confidence. You want to spend that extra time to give them the pat on the back, to ask them the question and give them the encouragement. And you also want to encourage them to really take that next step and throw them into the deep end, whether that is taking over for a department manager when the department manager goes on vacation, something along those lines, or giving them a particular area of expertise for them to manage. But try to throw them into the deep end and try to bring in that confidence. And if you accomplish both of those things, it kind of creates a little circuitous loop where they will start seeing their own ability if you keep up at it. Luke, that was a fantastic question, and best of luck with the summer to you. Our next question comes from Cathleen, and it is it better to confront an entire group of employees about an issue that only corresponds with one employee? That's a really good question, and I will tell you that I suffer from not being sure whether I should be addressing something in a group setting or just pulling the employee aside. And so let me first say that hopefully you have an opportunity to bring that up to an employee, one-on-one or a regular meeting setting, where you're not pulling somebody into an office where everybody sees that you're doing that, and then the next question is what did they do wrong? So hopefully you have a mechanism in place where you can give that regular feedback to an employee in the natural flow of your leadership. The one thing I do mention in this, and where I will tend to broadcast one employee's deficiency and just throw it out to the group, not naming the employee of course, is when it's more general performance issues. Whether it is, tardiness, whether it is production, volume, sales volume, that sort of thing, where it's good if you haven't brought it up to give the reminder of what exactly the expectation is. So if for some reason, and in the sales organization, I find it hard to believe it would take place, but if you haven't brought up what exactly is the expectation from a sales perspective for employees, if you haven't brought that up in 2 months, and somebody falls way short and gets written up for it, then it might be worthwhile to mention that to everybody. And so depending on the issue, that might be more valid. Obviously interpersonal issues, that sort of thing, those should be handled behind closed doors. But if you think there's value in giving the reminder to everybody, then that's something that I think you can do and is an effective use of your time, quite frankly, so you don't have to bring it up individually with everybody. Thanks for the question, Kathleen. Our next question comes from Angie, and it's, what is more important, a master's degree or experience? Angie, thank you so much for asking this particular question. From a personal perspective, I took business classes. I got a business degree from a 4-year institution, and I equate my experience in business school as to teaching me what I already knew but didn't know that I knew. Oh, there's the 4 P's for any marketing program, price, product, what have you. Oh yeah, it all makes sense. And I spent 2 years going, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there were a few classes, statistics, that sort of thing, where obviously you learned some things, but a lot of it was just bringing to your attention things that you already knew. And so I really have an issue with master's degree programs and how they're set up. I think that the best ones run through a scenario-based program. And scenario-based is based on real life. So why wouldn't you just take the leadership role in real life and get the experience in a live setting? And so I do question the validity of master's degree programs versus experience. I prefer to get the experience. I haven't gotten my master's degree. The caveat to that now is that master's degrees, if you are an exceptional student and have an exceptional background, master's degree programs are the fast track to the upper echelons in many companies. Not that my experience is limiting, not that I couldn't be a senior vice president or CEO of my organization without a master's degree. However, MBA students have a tendency of being dropped into VP positions after school based on their experience, and therefore leapfrog an individual who doesn't have it. So if you're a younger individual with a few years of experience, I think there is some value if you are going to be exceptional. If you're going to be in the bottom half of your class as an MBA student, then yes, experience is worthwhile. But for many of the people that I know that got master's degrees, they have progressed further in their careers than if they would not have gotten it. And while I might disagree with that, it is a basic fact of life. So thanks for the question, Angie. That's a good one that I'm sure lots of people have at the tip of their tongue. Our next question comes from Prakesh, and that is, do we need to be emotionally attached to employees or only focus on getting results at any cost? Prakesh, I'll almost cut this one short here and make it very simple. The way to get results is through your employees. And if you don't care about your employees, then you don't care about results. I'm going to say that one more time. If you don't care about your employees, then you don't really care about results. Because the only way you're going to get results is through your employees. I'm not going to say anything else. That cuts right to the case on it. Bijoy asked the question, can you explain project scope creep? And that's a good one. You probably were on a conference call and somebody kept mentioning it and you have no idea what it is. And I've been there on those conference calls many, many times where somebody's throwing around something I have no idea what it is. So for those that aren't aware of it, project scope creep is where you have a project. It can be a task, it can be any number of things, and you have kind of a set parameters on what your goal is, what you want to accomplish with it. And so I'll work an analogy on it of building a house. So you want to build a house. You want it to be 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Okay, simple. But what always happens as you go down this road is you discover things along the way. Oh, you know what? It would have been nice if the original project scope had such and such in it. It would have been nice if, we had a den in the house. Okay, well, let's go ahead and add a den. And so now you got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a den. And then you go a little bit further down the road and you go, you know what? We really need landscaping. And maybe a pool. And so then it starts expanding more. And so slowly but surely you discover these things, and one of the things that a project manager has to do is dial in that scope creep. A good project manager or somebody who sets up the project to start out with knows that there's going to be some of that, and knows that there's going to be those opportunities that come up that they want to take advantage of. Not all scope creep is bad. So you build in, a certain 10% to the timeline so that it doesn't last forever. But what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to set out to build a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and 2 years later you've got a 7-bedroom, 2-bath house with a 4-car garage, a pool, and a putting green on the side lawn. That's scope creep. You needed the house, you needed it done in 6 months so that you could move in, and here we are a month and a half down the road. And that's how a lot of projects go, is it starts out on a 6-month timeline under a certain parameter, and then all of a sudden it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden a year and a half down the road, it's still not finished, and nobody knows why, but that's usually what it is scope creep. So thanks for the clarifying question, Bijoy. I appreciate it. Our last question today comes from Rick. And it's, how can a superb performer be helped if he is hated by most of his colleagues? That's a really good question, Rick. Part of me would question whether they are a superb performer if they are hated by their colleagues. But as the leader, what's important, and I can see this taking place where there's certain interpersonal conflicts, what have you, and an individual is great but just can't seem to get along with individuals. But what you need to do is you need to sit down and have a frank discussion, because you have to work within a team. You can't be a superb performer if you can't get along and work with your team members. That's going to be a limiting factor. And if this person wants to get promoted, these are the sorts of things that need to be addressed and nipped in the bud right away before they become a huge problem for the organization. So have that frank discussion and lay out to them, this is what I'm hearing, and this is what I'm seeing, and try to keep naming names out of it and particular instances out of it, and they will probably ask, well, I need a specific example, and simply say that you can't give one because you don't want any sort of retaliation or any more uncomfortableness. But what you really want to get across when you have individuals that are disliked by their peers, generally those people are critical all the time and they don't help anybody. And so my best piece of advice for this superb performer of yours is to work on helping people out and not criticizing anything. Just try to go cold turkey with it. So this individual will reach out, offer help when they see it, offer help unsolicited, and not be critical of anybody. And I think what you'll see is that can very quickly, depending on your operational setup and how much there can be interplay and teamwork in there, you can see where in a month that completely turns around if this particular superb performer really steps up to the plate and tackles it and is serious about it. But have that frank discussion so that they are aware that there is an issue, and really drive home the fact that you want to see them be helpful to their teammates and that you want them to not be critical of their teammates. And I think you'll see that person turn around. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for their questions today. And again, if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, go ahead and drop a reply in there and ask your question, and I'll be sure to get it in future episodes. But from sunny Las Vegas, this is Cameron signing off for today. Thanks.